the Experimental Inquiry Methodology Conference. Our next presenter is a good friend of mine, actually my roommate, Abraham Noetz, who was born in the city of Ur in Mesopotamia in 2000 BCE. It's come a long way, a long way. Originally interested in artistic possibilities of things in Mesopotamia such as goat herding, divination, and trying to live up to the exhausting responsibility of sowing a seed to create a nation as numberless as the stars. In recent years, Abraham has begun drawing on two of his favorite mediums, photography and poetry, in order to work conceptually and interdisciplinarily. It's a tongue tire right there. He hopes very much to lift poetry from the page in order to whisper it into our ears and hearts and minds. So without further ado, Abraham Noetz.
Thank you. My talk will be quite different than the last one. I hope it's not too quick a shift in gears. I'm going to be speaking about the poet Paul Celan, whose book is there, which I can circulate. It's under that with the pink. Yeah, we can pass that around. He's a Romanian Jewish poet who is a Holocaust survivor and whose parents died in the Holocaust, and who ended up living in France, writing poetry in German. And he's somebody who's interested me for a long time, and I'm gonna be speaking about him and his idea of what a conversation is. But first, I'm gonna pass around some materials. And I don't know, there should be enough for everybody. Try to get a writing implement as well. Can I open this?
Yeah.
Now, this is going to come into play a little bit later, but I'd like people to take a minute and do a little bit of writing now. Let me just explain what this is going to be. Your cards either say then I and then if you, or they say then you if I. And this is a variation on a surrealist writing game, which you guys might be familiar with, in which these two statements are sort of created independently of one another and then juxtaposed together. So the way it'll work is the sentence doesn't have to start with then I or if you, but it can be, you can either disregard the pronoun or use it, you could use your or some variation thereof. But the idea is to sort of like think of something wacky, and then later on we'll actually read them. Does that make sense?
Right. So any sentence that has
so
this in it.
so it's going to be the two clauses you guys write should be independent of one another.
Okay.
They're going to be broken up. So just think of two unrelated. That's why I sort of did the reverse order. So it could be then fishes would come out of the ocean and call your name. Or if I were to roll out of a truck at midnight. I don't know.
We should do both if then you and if I, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, feel free to like the pronouns are sort of suggested. So you can, if you'd rather do one without a pronoun or alter it, that's fine. So think of those two, write them down. I'll do this way. And in the meantime, I don't know how many people we have here. I have 10 small font copies of what I'm going to be reading, which I'm going to pass around in the meantime. So I take one and pass it on if we have to share. There are 3 pages. staple floating around. Okay, it looks like people are finishing up, and because of time, I'm going to get started. Did the paper, did the handout go around?
Get it up
I
here.
guess it's
Anyone
People
can
need to
share?
go in.
I'm going to start off by reading a short poem by Salon, which is not on the handout. It's 3 pages and then stacked. The packet starts with pretty big. So yeah, I'm going to start off reading this short poem. Unreadability of this world all doubles. The strong clocks back the Fisher hour hoarsely. You, wedged into your deepest, climb out of yourself forever. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words, ladies and gentlemen, Paul Celan began his 1960 address to an audience in Darmstadt on the occasion of receiving the George Luckner Prize for Literature, the Meridian speech as it came to be known. A speech that is an address, a literary masterpiece in its own right, and the articulation of Celan's phenomenology of poetics. An incredible verbal artifact that drew the attention of minds no less impressive than those of Martin Heidegger, Emmanuel Levinas, and Jacques Derrida. A speech that Levinas eloquently called an elliptical and elusive text interrupting itself ceaselessly. Ladies and gentlemen, words of address, apostrophe, invocation that recur like a leitmotif throughout Celan's speech. An aesthetics of interruption, ladies and gentlemen, that speaks as much to what Celan perceives of his poetic act as all the words between. Standing physically before you, addressing a plural you, a community gathered in a whole, a room, a space, as we are so fond of saying here in Brooklyn, I would like to invite you into the imagined collective space you're already in. I would like you to follow me into the imagined, the constructed, the primal space of Paul Celan's poetics, the space of the encounter with the other. In my own humble fashion, I would like to address you, to reach out to you, to create again this encounter, not with the authority of a philosopher, no less that of a poet, but rather from a provisional space of conjecture, reflection, inquiry. And it is in the spirit of humility, of tentative conjecture, that I would like to think through with you, ladies and gentlemen, Celan's Meridian speech, Levinas's Being and the Other on Paul Celan, and Derrida's talk Shibboleth for Paul Celan and his thinking of dates, anniversaries, rings, constellations. A thinking through that I hope will lead us back by way of a lengthy detour to the topic under investigation at this first Experimental Inquiry Methodology Conference. Conversation, dialogue, and exchange, a communication. In Celan's terms, I hope to shed some light on the limits and possibilities of dialogue, of conversation, which in the final analysis becomes the limits and possibilities of, you guessed it, of language itself.